Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers.
Right? No judging. No judging.
The millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby, tell them.
Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. Again, Justin Fox, PJ Kwong. PJ, thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
I am delighted to be here, Justin. Thank you for asking me.
Awesome. So we just talked about a bunch of things off air, but anyways, let's jump in. I'm interested, I'll do a quick little bio here. So you're a freelance professional with an entrepreneurial spirit, which is the foundation of the creation of content, of the content store, sorry. You're always looking for things to fill your time, and the bigger the challenge, the more you like it. You can write, wrangle, teach, produce, think creatively, and generally do whatever needs doing. You pride yourself on being able to offer solutions and take as much care with other people's projects and visions as you do your own. And you're willing to take on short or long-term assignments. And as you said, let's talk. You've done a lot of cool things, right? So the content store, you've obviously been a freelance writer, social media voice and commentator for CBC Sports, which is really cool. I want to jump into that. Sports journalism teacher with Centennial College, as well as, a number of other kind of journalism and other endeavors. So lots of fun stuff. Sports,
it has been fun.
It has been fun. Awesome. Yeah. Sports, I love. Probably my number one passion in life is sports. In sort of all walks. So why don't we start there?
Okay.
I'm gonna do a question. I'm just top of the head. What sport did you play as a kid, or what was your sport as a kid growing up? What were you kind of into?
It's still my only sport. Figure skating.
Figure skating. Yeah, I was gonna say.
I've announced a ton of sports. Right. One of the things that wasn't in that introduction is the fact that I'm a stadium announcer. So, and I've done I have done all of the largest events in the whole world. So FIFA World Cup, Winter Olympic Games, Summer Olympic Games, Youth Olympic Games, Pan Am Games. I've done them all. Okay, awesome. So figure skating, and and obviously with CBC Sports, you've been very prominent in that space, sports and journalism, with Centennial. So figure skating, where did you kind of get to in figure skating? As nowhere. I'm really quite a talentless figure skater.
So you then got into the sort of the journalism and the media side.
Well, interesting you should say that. Actually, it all started with coaching.
Okay. Coaching,
and I have to say out loud that I consider journalists to be a very kind of a very rare breed. I don't consider myself to be a journalist. I consider myself to be a storyteller, because journalism has with it a very specific set of parameters, and there's a degree of professionalism and training that I don't have, but admire. So I still love to sort of tell stories, and I think it's really important to get to the truth. And I'm not someone who plays fast and loose with facts, but I still think, I hold journalists in the very highest regard. And for someone to call me a journalist, I'm very flattered by it. But honestly, I'm a storyteller. I'm a writer. And that's really where I hang my hat.
Interesting. So and I'm going to use sort of the analogy. A lot of times in sports, you've got the people that have done it, right? Sort of the athletes, then you've got maybe the coaches that have done it and have that expertise. And then they often kind of migrate over to what you would consider the journalist or the media side, because they can lend sort of that insight, right? Into the thought process or maybe the technical aspect of that sport.
I'm definitely on the media side. Definitely on the media side.
Right.
But I mean, there's not going to be any Pulitzer Prize in my future for anything. Do you know what I mean? But I can tell a good story, and I get the facts right, and the words are extremely important to me. But I just, I had a great conversation once with Rosie DiMano from The Star, who was talking about, I asked her if she would, if I could interview her sort of for a podcast and she said, it seems, and she didn't say it with any kind of attitude or anything. She said, it seems like everybody with kind of a cell phone and, a microphone calls himself a journalist. And I said, I don't. I said, Rosie, you're a journalist.
Right.
And I said, I'm a writer. I work in media for sure. And I'll own that. And it's really important to me, again, to get the facts right. But as far as the training that goes into somebody who's gone to journalism school, I put it this way. I can't say I'm any more a journalist than they can say they're a figure skating coach. We
Right.
each have our areas of expertise. My area of expertise as a coach lends itself to my ability to be able to tell stories, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I'm not a journalist either. I'm a guy with Zoom that can record calls and kind of does a bit of a video. I like the interview aspect.
Me too.
Finding people's stories and hearing about what people are up to or what they've done or the kind of the journey that they've been on over the years. So interesting that so let's kind of dive into some of the sports. You mentioned some of the events that you've announced at. Do you have any maybe greatest experience or kind of time or most, I don't know, I won't say great, but like memorable or maybe a least memorable or it's probably memorable, but least enjoyable time that you've maybe had?
Do you know what? To tell you the truth, they're all, and I'm going to give you some examples. So I'm not just going to say, oh, they're all memorable and I love them all equally like my children.
Right.
We
do love all of our children equally though, right? Just
of course.
Anyone watching, yes. Yeah.
Some days, some of them more equally than others, but that's a story for a different day.
Yes.
In 2002, at the Winter Olympic Games in Salt Lake City, I was at figure skating where there was the biggest scandal that had ever happened in figure skating where it unfolded, which was a scandal that ultimately resulted in the change in the judging system in figure skating.
Okay.
It was where one judge from France had declared before the games even started that she was going to throw her lot in with a Russian pair, regardless of how they skated. So Jamie Soleil and David Peltier from Canada initially won the silver and then ended up with the co-gold with Elena Berezhnaya and Anton Sirulidze. So that was a fairly, talk about being thrown in the deep end in your Olympic experience. So that was a super interesting games. Couple it on the other end with, I was in Tokyo for the Olympic Games announcing at field hockey, or as they like to say, hockey. I said I'm Canadian. I can't call it just hockey. Anyway,
they call it ice hockey. They call what we play ice hockey, right? That's sort of
yes, and we just call it hockey. But interesting. Here's a little interesting fact. Field hockey is the second largest game behind soccer in terms of participation. Did you know that?
I knew it was up there. I wasn't sure how
number
popular,
two.
but I knew it was right up there. Yeah.
And it was super fun. But to be at an Olympic event where there are no spectators, where we're still following exactly the same protocols, exactly trying to deliver exactly the same kind of experience for the athletes without spectators, again, super interesting.
Right.
I never thought in a million years I'd ever be at the World Cup. That was fascinating. And
soccer?
to be, and to be
football,
World Cup, FIFA World Cup.
Again, they would say.
Yes.
Yes.
But that was to be in St. Petersburg. And to
In
see that
Russia?
on,
That was,
yes.
Okay. What was that?
2018.
18? Yeah. Okay.
So to see that unfold, to watch the passion of the fans, to see the fans in the street, again, like I get to be sort of a fly on the wall for some of these really interesting events.
Right.
In sort of like it's the job that we do as stadium announcers or PA announcers is known, with no disrespect to anybody religious, but it's known as the voice of God because it's above you.
Right.
You don't know exactly where
they are. They're
So, but it's fascinating because you just kind of walk through the crowd and people never sort of go, oh, that has to be the announcer. There's no sort of like ring around you. There's nothing. So I kind of love the anonymity of the job and to be able to sort of watch these amazing athletes perform. But I'm also kind of like a step away from it.
Right.
I don't have a horse in the race. So all I get to do is to watch the very best of the best of the best perform, their game, their sport. And then the results are the results. So it's truly a position of privilege. And I go like this, pinching.
It's to see if you're still. It's funny when you said 2002 figure skating drama. I was trying to think Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding, but I think that was probably about
94.
10 years earlier,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to do the math, like what year would that have been? But yeah, because that
Yeah.
was, when I was still in high school. So interesting. That's probably,
Me too.
yeah. Okay. There you go. Exactly. So, so many years ago, but, what is, so you've mentioned some of these major sporting events. You talked about the FIFA World Cup. What kind of got you from coach to kind of, give us that journey? Because I think a lot of people, like you said, you're kind of at, I'll call it the pinnacle or there, but there's obviously been a journey. We talked about your entrepreneurial spirit and something, like, give us sort of that journey. Like, how does somebody become an announcer, which seems sort of I don't think there was a guidance counselor in high school was saying, FIFA World Cup announcer was not like a role.
Nope.
Like,
was not a thing.
It's not, I mean, I'm sure people strive for it, but like, what's that journey? Like, give us sort of, you're in Toronto, I don't know if you want to go all the way back. I mean, give us sort of, what's that journey? How does that look for you?
Well, it's first of all, as an entrepreneur and someone with an entrepreneurial spirit, my default position is to always say yes.
Okay.
So even if I don't know exactly what I'm saying yes to, like this podcast, I just think, what's the worst that can happen?
Okay.
What's he going to do? Ask me for my PIN number? I mean, really. So I just sort of at different times have decided. I
appreciate you joining me, obviously. Yes. Thank you.
I'm very happy to be here, but sometimes you just don't know. So
right.
I know that way back in 1990, I went to the World Figure Skating Championships in Halifax as a spectator.
Right.
And as I was watching the and I was already had been a coach for 6 or 7 years by that time. My oldest child was born, and I had been working in the hospitality and the hotel business. And I tried to figure out a way where I could attend to the needs of my family. So, daughter and husband at the time, and still make some money to contribute to the family pot. So to me, figure skating, which I had done sort of my whole life and I had a real passion for,
right.
And I love to teach. So I decided to try coaching. So, and I stayed coaching for, believe it or not, 30 years as my sort of basic bread and butter. Anyway,
okay.
1990, I was already coaching, already a mother twice over, pregnant with my third.
Okay.
And I was at this event and I decided, interesting. I bet you that would be kind of a cool thing to do. And I bet you the tickets would be free. You wouldn't have to pay
right.
to come and watch the event.
Right.
Truly my thinking. So I started pursuing it. And as it turned out, not a lot of women announcers, certainly in North America at the time.
Right.
I've got a voice that's fairly deep for a woman. So it meant that in buildings, it didn't sort of like bounce off the walls in
right.
a way that was difficult for the audience to hear.
Right.
And I'm bilingual. So
okay.
I threw my hat in the ring and said, gee, I'd kind of like to try this. And there was a little bit of resistance at first. Well, what do you mean? And I said, I just think it's something I can do. So sure enough, my first
the resistance from, though, just out of curiosity, from
pardon
like,
me?
Who was the resistance from? Like the
sort of
organizers or?
At the time, there was a rule that existed that in figure skating, you couldn't be an announcer and be making money from the sport. Announcers were deemed to be
impartial, kind of
volunteers, and
okay.
And I ended up being on the agenda for the next 7 years at the National Sports AGM. So
okay.
it was voted on to see if I was actually allowed to, because I had all of the qualities that they wanted. Plus I love the sport.
Right.
So my first event actually was national championships for synchronized swimming, now known as artistic swimming.
Okay.
And I realized that, the idea of it being competition, the numbers, the process, the officials, none of it was nerve-wracking for me.
Right.
So I went over to figure skating, that moved on. And then as time sort of developed, as time sort of evolved, I just decided one time that I wanted to see what else there was out there. So
Right.
I was at an event, the World Championships in Vancouver in 2001. I met the sport manager for the Salt Lake City Olympic Games, and I asked if I could put in my sort of like a demo.
Right.
And so from there, that's how I got hired. Again, French was what really helped, because at the time the announcements were equal French and English at the Olympic Games.
Right.
And then from there, I just started thinking, okay, well, what else can I do? So I had done some, ad hoc work for CBC. And I said, I'd really like to write, because I always write these kooky stories that I send home to friends and family. And they decided that they wanted an insider to start writing about figure skating. Now, everything has changed since the pandemic, because, the ability for live events and et cetera, et cetera. So I haven't done any writing since like March of 2020 for CBC.
Right.
But it's just the whole idea. And then a friend called me who's part of a large science company and said, do you want to write for us? And I said, I don't know anything about science. But then I realized I don't know anything about a lot of stuff.
Right.
So I can learn. So that's just been my idea. And if you are not an idiot, and if you're not a jerk, and if you're basically professional and I think kind to people and work in a collaborative way, people, it turns out, are happy to invite you to other things because you don't cause any problems.
Right.
So I'm not somebody who's ever been sort of like a diva who goes, excuse me, I'd like to have my own hairdresser.
Only red M&Ms, or only, I've heard like sort of the, whatever.
Yeah, there's none of that with me. It's
Only
just like,
yellow peanut M&Ms, right? Yeah.
and as a result, I think back sometimes to the experiences and the places I've been as a result, and I just couldn't be more grateful. So I wake up grateful every day. It's a nice place to be.
Like you said, you pinch yourself on the shoulder.
I do.
So, yeah, that's perfect. So
that hurt, by the way. I gave myself a hard pinch.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, don't do that. So obviously, let's dive into that, because I was going to talk a little bit about the content store, but I think it's interesting that you mentioned that kind of segues into, because I think you started that around like 2017, 18, like maybe 2-3 years ago.
Content store? Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
so obviously,
yeah.
So the world's changed, and so I'd love
Yes.
to hear. We kind of talked off air about obviously your mother-in-law going through some things, and obviously COVID is playing a major role in everyone's life.
Of course.
And not to get too political on things, but what are your take on sort of where we go? Like what's obviously your world's changed, as you said. You haven't done any live events, which obviously is was
For writing, for writing.
and other different things, right? So where I guess what inspired the content store? You kind of just gave that, but where do you see we've gone in the past year and a half, and maybe where do you see it going, and what is your future looking like, in the next, let's say 1, 3, 5 years?
So here's the thing that I've noticed when I was talking. I'm not teaching at Centennial College any longer, but I spent, I think, 5 years or so teaching in broadcast journalism.
Okay.
And young people would come to me and they'd say, I want to be where you are. And I said, good for you. I'm happy to be where I am.
Right.
How do I get there? And I said, I actually don't know, because this is my path, but it may not be the same for you.
Yeah.
And then, I talk lots of times at young people, because I love being a mentor for young people. The truth of the matter is there is no shortcut. So
Right.
whatever it is you're going to do, it's hard work. Whatever it is that you're going to take on, it's not like somebody's going to come and hand it to you. There
Right.
hasn't been an opportunity yet where actually that's not true. There've been a couple, but they've been as a result of other things that I've done.
Right. Yeah.
So, on a day like today, so my advice always is, and my position always is, if this is what you want, nobody's stopping you, but
Right.
nobody's going to hand it to you. So I had young people where I would say to them, okay, you want to be, let's say, on-air talent on television. What are you doing to convince me that I want to hire you? Doesn't matter how good your demo reel is. Do you have a social media presence? What have you done to develop that? Have you done your own stories? Have you, posted a blog that has content that's of interest to people? What have you done to invest in yourself? Because none of it, you're also not great at anything. It's that old 10,000 hour rule or whatever it is. You're not great at anything as you first start out. So I really believe, and it's one of the sort of the cornerstones of sort of my work philosophy, you can attain, or you can attempt to attain whatever you want, but it's going to take hard work.
Yeah.
So for instance, on a day like today where I've got, this recording with you, it means that I got up, I usually get up at 6. I got up at 5:30 because there were some things that I actually had to get done before we started this conversation.
Right.
So does that mean that I can go back to clients and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to be talking to Justin, so you're just going to have to hold off for a while?
Right.
No, I have to
prioritize
organize
or
myself.
organize. Right.
So I really felt at the time I started.
You didn't have to do that, honestly. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, but it's
I appreciate that. Yeah.
But it's what I know. I'm happy to do it because everything's choices. So
Right.
when I started the content store, initially it was with a partner, and it's now just me. And I really felt that I wanted to show the world that the content store is kind of what I believe people need, which is kind of like a placeholder. It shows the kinds of things you can do. It shows a little bit about who you are, but it's not a for commerce site. It's really just here's where I'm parking some things that I'm proud of that I think I can help you with. So I think people are well served in thinking about who the client is or who the
Right.
customer is, what they're selling, why they're selling it, and why it's important. Because if you can answer that question, then people are going to want to be engaged with you.
Right. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. My son brings this up. You mentioned sort of the quote. It's on a commercial right now. It's you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. I think it's Adidas or
I love that.
brands. Yeah, it aligns with what you're saying, right? And it's definitely hard work. And everyone, I joke with a lot of people. We talk about the overnight success that takes that was 10, 20 years in the making, right? Like no one sees the 20 years to get there, right? They just see, like you said, you're at where you're at, but that journey isn't a straight line. So it's
so 12 years of being in cold rinks at local competition, none of which I regret.
Right.
In order to make it to the Olympic Games. So it's not like I started in 1990 and said, you know what, I'm not going to do anything unless you let me go to the Olympic Games.
Right.
So none of that happened. It was all very much, I'm doing it because I love to do it.
Right.
And wherever I end up.
And you were good at it too, obviously. And then that kind of, right. And you perfected your craft over time, right? So.
Well, it's important to me. It's important to me to do my best. As I'm fond of saying, this is the Olympic Games for those athletes.
Right.
I would feel terrible if I called you Justine Fox on your way to get your medal.
Right.
Your mother's watching, you know what I mean? So I consider it really important I think, and I often say this, I've done this and I'm not getting anywhere. I said, doing a job well is its own reward. I know it's old fashioned, but that's what I really think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's okay. Many people call me by many names. So Justine probably wouldn't be the worst, but anyway, so let's talk a little bit about the content store. So it sounds like a really interesting, and I was seeing that you've worked with a number of different organizations. I think it was Ontario Volleyball, Skate Ontario, cycling, different sort of organizations. What exactly, and sort of the storytelling of getting them, and you kind of alluded to it. So how does that work? Like, I mean, obviously, we talked a little bit about it off air. I kind of started a 3-on-3 pro hockey league that's,
which I love.
And we're looking to get back on track. And, I'd love to maybe have that conversation off air about this, how maybe you could we could work together to kind of tell its story. But tell us a little bit about the content store and sort of, how it evolved and like what it actually is. And what it is that you do on a very specific level, I guess.
So I'm going to talk smack a little bit about content providers.
Okay. Providers as in like
all the people that are out there who call themselves, I'm going to say it, but I'm going to choke on it, storytellers, although I say that the same.
Okay.
A lot of people speak what I call weasel. So you come to them as a client and they start telling you all about SEO optimization and you're lost. I'm lost, and I know what they're talking about.
Right.
So I really wanted to create an environment where you, as somebody who didn't really know, you knew you needed something, but you didn't really know what it should be, and you didn't have the right vocabulary around it. I was going to take you by the hand and say, listen, here are some things that we can do. Here are some things that aren't going to cost you a lot of money. Here are some things that are going to cost you a little bit of money. Here are some things that are going to cost you a lot of money.
Right.
Choose what you want to do. So the idea behind it was that you would say, I only need one blog post. I need one blog post, as the starting point for my website. I want to be able to, attract this kind of clientele or whatever. And then we figure out what's actually going to be in your best interest. I adopted over the course of the pandemic broadcast platform called StreamYard. And actually, when this camera turns off, I'm going to talk to you about it because it's the best thing I have ever found that makes me look like I'm actually producing a real live broadcast. So it's different from Zoom, but it's really kind of a cool way to sort of attract an audience. So I've done a ton of business that I never would have expected through this platform that can allow me to broadcast simultaneously at my level of subscription on 3 platforms like Facebook, Periscope/Twitter, and on Facebook, I said Facebook, and YouTube.
Okay.
So simultaneously. So I am a big believer that kind of program, and I've done programs for Speed Skating Ontario, Skate Ontario, and I do some work for Skate Ontario anyway. So I just want to say that out loud. But Ontario Volleyball hired me, Ontario Basketball, lots of different companies only need a little bit of something to get them started, or they're not really sure what it looks like. And sometimes if somebody provides you with something, you can then duplicate it on your own. So it's not saying to you, you need to spend thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to get what you want. You can, but you don't have to. So if it's just sort of looking at, somebody assessing, your website or your social media presence, I can do that and say, listen, you could probably pick up the ball, here. And here's a sample of sort of 10 posts that you can use and adapt and put them up yourself. So I really believe that lots of things have become overly complicated. And if people are like me, I want to know, I want you to boil it down so that I can understand it. So it's like when people start talking about stocks in the stock market, I have no idea what they're talking about. I really don't. So I go to.
I don't think many people do.
But they pretend to. And the people who are like the stock people, they know what they're talking about.
They probably don't even know either. But yeah.
Well, except that they want to make sure that they can make
they
sure
make it very complicated, right?
So that you have to pay them lots more.
Right.
So I'm a big believer that we're all smart enough to be able to figure things out for ourselves. So that's the sort of like the core, that's the nugget that that's the nugget that was the center of what I was thinking about for the content store. So I wanted people to be able to come and say, oh, gee, I'd like a little bit of that and a little bit of that, and I don't need that because my nephew knows how to do whatever. So it's a way to put people back in control of what they're trying to do. And again, a term that is used a lot, but controlling the message. You don't want someone else to define who you are or who your company is or what they do. You want to be able to do that for yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, definitely the messaging, and we should probably maybe talk about backers. We're kind of going through a bit of messaging as well, shifting as we evolve, what we're doing. From sort of, it's not changing, but it definitely the vision is there. It's just now we're kind of actually activating or going through or developing what we kind of set out to do. Same with the 3HL and anything, right? And all the
it's all a work in progress.
Exactly. All the businesses that we work with. I mean, that's kind of the first thing that we, try to instill in them is that you really need to get your messaging, because if you're going to try and sell your vision, your dream to, the broader public, which is essentially what backers allows them to do, is sell that vision to the broader public to allow them to then invest in their business. They have to have that, like you said, that story, that message, that kind of, I won't say hook, but like that, that really, the why, right? That you could talk a little about, sort of why would somebody care? Right? Why do they care about what you're talking about? How does it impact them? And why is that story important to them?
And also, who cares?
Well, the who, exactly. Why should they care? And who are they? So you have to know who they are, and then why should they care? Exactly, right? So kind of identifying.
And you know, the language around communications, I find, and again, I came to communications as a result of being a communicator versus through a program or a degree or whatever.
Right.
But it's funny, I used to say to a young friend when I was working at the Invictus Games, she would talk about key messages, and she was super smart. And I mean, somebody that I have great respect for. And I used to say, we could say key messages, but why don't we just say facts?
Facts, right? Yeah. Keep it simple, right? Keep it simple,
Keep it
super
simple.
kind of, right?
Because the key messages should actually be the facts around your company. Because
Right.
key messages can also be a total, pile of baloney. You could
Right.
say, my key message is that, I'm a communications goddess and that I've been anointed by, the communications people. That's not true, but it's a key message I want to get out there. Perhaps I'd prefer
Right.
to say the facts, that I'm on your side. I want to help you get to where you want to go. I don't know where you want to go. We've got to figure that out. And you've got to tell me.
Right.
And I can help you figure that out through, a series of questions and conversations, and just that idea of trust, that you're not talking about something that I don't know how to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting you mentioned was StreamYard, right? I've sort of come across that as well as a tool. I've used Wirecast in the
I
past.
don't know
kind
that
of-
one.
Yeah, it's sort of a laptop-based software that allows you to broadcast and put overlays and different things like that.
Cool.
I don't do that with this show. This is a very basics, but bare bones kind of just. That's why it's called One Take. I was trying
Yeah.
to come up with a name. It's like I take what we record in one take and put it up on, and kind of do some editing around the bumpers on the front and back, and maybe throw some names on there. But other than that, the actual interview is just one take. So anyways,
You can do that with StreamYard too, by the way.
yeah,
you can
just
just
kind of push
record.
it out. Is it live
Yep.
too, or is it
Doesn't have to be.
It doesn't,
Doesn't have to be.
Interesting.
So I'm going to show you later, Justin.
Yeah?
It's going to
Okay,
blow your
okay.
mind.
Let's talk about. So okay, we definitely need to connect on both the 3HL and backers. I have other ideas as well, but PJ, I really appreciate you joining me here today. I know, as you said, you've got other things to do, so I want to end it with a couple of things. One is, where can people find you? You mentioned, social media presence. Are you on TikTok? Tell me you're on
No.
TikTok. No?
Okay. I'm going to tell you one thing. I don't get it.
You don't get it?
I don't get, so we'll have it. And I have these conversations with people lots of times.
Yeah.
I think that it's a lot of work. It's kind of like Instagram stories. I do very few of them. It's a lot of work in my mind for what I need to do and what I need to get out there, for not the return that I like.
So here's my take on TikTok is, and I mean, I jumped in and did a little bit, probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago. So like even sort of 2019.
At the beginning.
At the very, yeah. Well, I mean, it started probably 17, but they changed from Musical.ly to TikTok at some point. But I think, and this is what I say, and quite frankly, I don't do a lot of it right now, and I would like to start doing more of it. So I'm not, it's almost like do as I say, not as I do. But I do think there is no other platform out there that gives you the reach that TikTok does at this moment.
Yeah, I think you're right.
From their algorithm,
Yep.
You can have 0 followers, have 0 videos, have 0 content. You put out something and you could have literally like, your first video will probably get 300 to 500 views, or your first clip, or whatever you want to call it, your first post. So you can get exposure and grow an audience or a following very quickly within, and so it's like anything, you put the time and effort. So I think relative or comparative to, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, I think it has the most potential for reach if your demo, and people are a little, I think, this is just my take. So take it from a grain of salt, but the demographics are there. People think it's 12-year-olds. It's actually
it's everybody.
Completely changed now, right? So I think that the key though for TikTok is, if you're going out with the same message that you would do on YouTube or Facebook, it's probably not going to work, right?
Yeah, you have to adapt.
Funny, kind of like entertaining, kind of infotainment versus, hey, this is the news, right? And so I think, if you have that creativity, you can definitely take advantage of it. I think people overthink it a little bit. That's the other side.
Yeah, for sure.
Start to think like they need to do these like massive time consuming skits when I don't think you need that either. I think if it's short, quick, funny, insightful, whatever, you can definitely take advantage of it. So that's,
So here's what I will say, Justin.
yeah.
I think that TikTok certainly has its place.
Yeah.
And if I was working with a client and I felt that that was something that they needed in order to establish their audience,
Yeah.
great.
100%. Yeah.
I don't, as I said, for what it would give me and the amount of time it would take away from money making in other places,
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me. The one that's still my favorite, I know it's old school, Twitter, because it's so
Twitter, yeah.
easily shared.
Right.
So when I'm doing, stuff about figure skating, news about skaters that are coming out or something that's going on, then that for me is still the best because it's short, sweet, and you can kind of see what's going on. And I don't know that why I've always done social media for like a gazillion years is to demonstrate that I know how to do it and I can create an audience, right?
Right.
So that's the whole reason for doing it. It's not necessarily that I need to
You don't
foster
benefit necessarily from it?
Not necessarily, not.
Right.
I think when people are talking about content, again, you look at content and like, oh, they've only got 4 followers. How do they actually know about content, right? So
Right.
I built an audience around content because I wanted to demonstrate that I actually knew what that meant.
Right.
So if you were a client and TikTok made a lot of sense for you, then I would help you do that. But for me, it doesn't necessarily, it's the amount of time that it takes. And some like people are so genius, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I have huge admiration. So I'm not discounting it as something. It's just that there are only so many hours in the day. And
Right.
that's not one that's going to actually get me some money. So
Right. Interesting.
that's kind of the way I see it.
So where can people find you then? I guess what other social
So
channels? What are your handles?
The big 3, of course, are Instagram and Twitter and Facebook.
Okay.
On Instagram and Facebook, it's PJ Kwong.
Yeah.
And on Twitter, it's @skatingpj.
At
And
Skating PJ? Okay,
that's probably their best bet.
At Skating PJ. All right. So go follow those 3. And then obviously the website, the content store. Is it
Yes.
the content store?
Yep, .ca.
.ca, right? Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Well,
Or pjkwong.com. They can also go there.
pjkwong.com and on LinkedIn, obviously, is where we connected, right?
Yes.
So they can find you on LinkedIn. So
That-
cool.
And I'm just going to say one thing about LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That's a surprise to me. I was experimenting in the last little while, just sort of putting stuff up to see viewership and audience and whatever else. And for a platform that initially started as just business,
Right.
people actually are consuming content that isn't business. I
Right.
wrote an interesting little story because, as I said, I write sort of private stories backstage to friends and family. And I wrote a story about the earthquake that I experienced in Tokyo, mild, but it nevertheless was kind of surprising because it was early in the morning.
Right.
And I put that on LinkedIn just to see if it would get traffic, and it surprisingly did.
Right. Yeah. LinkedIn's great. I mean, that's, as I said, I really like TikTok. I have not utilized it. I think there's huge value there, but
Yep.
I've used LinkedIn primarily as my kind of go-to in the sort of B2B
That's how we met.
space. And that exactly right. So I've been able to grow that over the past 3, 5, 8 years or whatever. So yeah. So that's interesting that you were able. Yeah, I do agree that people are starting to kind of slide a little more personal, and then you do see some of the back sort of people are like, oh, this is not meant for, put this on Facebook. So there is a bit of tension there in some posts. I'm sure a post about you're working your way, that's cool, but if you start doing certain personal political stuff, I think.
Well, the reason why I did it though was strategic. The reason why I put that story up, first of all, I liked the story and I liked writing it and I liked reading it.
Right.
But I put it because I said I can put your story into words as well. That's the whole reason why I did it. So it was not. It was a way to say, like, I'm not kidding. I actually do know how to write. I do know how to, craft a story, a narrative.
Yeah.
So it was very strategic. It was a business decision. It's not a vanity decision because honestly, I don't usually put that kind of stuff out there.
Right.
It was strictly business. So
Perfect.
that was, and I found value in it.
Awesome.
I'm always learning new stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, always be learning, right? That's kind of the, forget the ABC, it's ABL, right? Always be learning. So one last question. One last question is, if you had one word or one piece of advice to a younger PJ, or actually I have 2 questions because I'd love to know what PJ stands for, but the other one is, and that might be my curveball of the whole day. But the other one is, if there was one word or one piece of advice that you would give to a younger you or somebody coming up, what would that be?
Run your own race. Don't let anybody define you for you. Run your own race.
Perfect. PJ,
Well,
does
I used
anyone
to-
know? Does
Oh,
anyone
yeah, all
know?
kinds of
Yeah,
people.
okay.
I used to say to all my little skaters, they'd say, "What's it stand for?" And say, "Pure joy." And they
Pure
go,
joy.
"Really?" I go, "No,
No.
it's Patricia Joanne."
Patricia Joanne. Because I have a J as a middle name too, and I sometimes have gone JJ, and I just think it's interesting. So cool. Well, PJ, Patricia Joanne, thank you very much for joining me on the show today. It's been a pleasure. We'll definitely should connect, talk about.
We're going to,
all the
whether you
fun
want
stuff.
to or not.
Yes, 100%. So, but likewise, I feel the same way. So, everyone else, though, this is One Take, powered by backers, Justin Fox, PJ Kwong. PJ, thank you very much for joining me. Everyone else, I will see you guys again very soon. Bye. Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. Right?
No judging.
Yeah.
No judging.
The millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby.